Welcome back. Well, as federal ministers met to talk about issues of inflation and housing affordability, Canadians are increasingly pointing their finger in their direction. Here's a look by the numbers. 30% of Canadians surveyed by Nanos Research blame government spending for inflation. That's a slight increase from a year ago. But a fast-growing number, or 10%, say the Bank of Canada's interest rate policies are to blame. That's up from just 3% a year ago. Meanwhile, businesses get some blame. 22% think businesses raising prices is causing inflation. And supply chain issues from pandemic are still seen as an issue, but only 17% blame those problems compared to 31% a year ago. Almost 2/3 of Canadians think immigration will make housing pricier. 42% say increased targets will have a negative effect on housing costs. Another 26% see a somewhat negative impact. 20% of those surveyed thought higher immigration targets would have a positive or somewhat positive effect on housing. Housing, of course, isn't really federal jurisdiction, but that doesn't mean the federal government isn't held to account. And while it may land on the provinces to solve, they don't seem to be making much headway either. Marit Stiles is leader of the New Democratic Party of Ontario, leader of the official opposition in that province. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be here.
So are you disappointed that there isn't a big federal announcement on housing this week?
I was disappointed. I would have thought coming out of that federal caucus retreat, we would see a commitment to some, actual concrete plans and solutions. Certainly here in Ontario, like in so many other parts of the country, we are in a major housing crisis. It's what everybody is talking about. It's on the minds of people that I meet in every corner of this province, whether you're in the north, rural communities, or where I am here today in the city of Toronto. So I think what's astonishing to me is that I'm not seeing that kind of sense of urgency from our federal or provincial partners.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that seems amazing about this problem, of course, is that we've known about it so long, and yet it still seems to be moving really slowly. We're seeing housing starts at levels that aren't good enough to get us where we need to go. What can happen? What would you do to change that?
Well, first of all, I would say that it's in talking to a lot of municipalities across this province, a lot of them do have many permits are ready to go. Like the approvals have been done in many of our municipalities now. So what's stopping us now is getting the developers moving. And of course, we know with interest rates high like they are, there's some disincentives for developers right now. What we need is for both levels of government, I would say, to get together to work with, meet with developers, nonprofit suppliers, talk to the planners and the experts, and move forward now with a plan to get that development actually happening. So again, I think that the approvals and the permitting process is going better, but we need rules in place that will help to move it along so we can get those housing starts happening. And a big part of this as well is we need governments to start building housing too. Right. The provincial and federal governments got out of that business 30 years ago. We need them to get back in there because we need to build truly affordable housing and that crucial missing middle.
And we did hear this week a recognition that, immigration, student visas can play a big role in bumping up the demand, and that causes some problems. Do you welcome the idea of a closer reflection on how some of those policies do affect housing? Should we put them together more than we have?
Well, I think our post-secondary institutions in Ontario here, they're severely underfunded by the provincial government. So they rely on those international student fees, but, they aren't also helping to provide the housing that we need for those students. So there's definitely room there. Absolutely. We want to, bring more folks to Canada, to Ontario, but we can't have them, literally pushed to the curb. We need housing here. We need to crack down on speculative land banking and speed up building. And we need to build within municipalities. This is another issue here, right? We've got a government that wants to build sprawl. We've got this whole paving over of the Greenbelt controversy happening here. That's not the answer. We need to build within municipal boundaries.
All right. So good to have you with us, Marit. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Marit Stiles is leader of the New Democratic Party of Ontario, leader of the official opposition. Well, it does seem that immigration is one area that the feds are influencing housing on the demand side, but otherwise can have a limited impact. The same is true of inflation. How much of that is homemade? The question, of course, is what are the best policies to help the Canadian economy right now? Matt Holmes is Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Relations at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Matt, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
So, obviously, Canadian businesses have been through a lot, and there is still great concern out there for businesses and for individuals about the rate of inflation in this country. So I did want to start there. What business is hoping to hear? What's the roadmap that you think businesses need to hear from our federal government?
Well, I think we all hear about inflation and we all feel it right now in the marketplace. And it's important to remember that businesses are feeling that too. And so small businesses, large businesses, they're all trying to manage cost pressures that they're facing and measure how much of that they can reasonably pass on to consumers. So that's a pressure on businesses just as much as it is on households. Another part of that, of course, is labor. It's really hard right now to find the right skills, the right talent in the marketplace, and businesses across multiple regions, multiple sectors are facing that labor issue, which also has an inflationary element to it as well.
So just on those fronts, of course, we just saw it from the cabinet retreat this week that, you've got an immigration policy on one side that can, of course, be pro-growth. And a lot of businesses would welcome that, both from the point of view of labor and from just sheer growing demand in the economy. But that stresses other parts of our economy, including housing and affordability. When we think about kind of bringing those two pieces together, where do you think businesses land and what they would like to see?
Well, you can't solve one without the other, frankly. And the Canadian Chamber for years has been calling for an ambitious policy around immigration, and we're quite supportive of what we've seen to date. We're happy to see ambitious targets. We want to see more people come into the country. We need that talent. We need that growth in our labor force. We need it for the growth of our economy, frankly. But you can't have a national immigration strategy without a national housing strategy, as we're starting to discuss and hear about every day. And on top of that, I would add you need a national skills strategy. So what are the skills we need for the future? What are the skills that we need for today's economy? And how can we match those two together so that we're bringing the right talent into Canada to address some of those skills? And I would say we need to start with housing.
What's the read that you're getting at the Chamber on how businesses are feeling? Because one of the big questions has been, will there be a recession? And when there's uncertainty around that, of course, businesses will tend to err on the side of risk aversion, in my experience. Are you seeing a pullback on business spending, on hiring plans that can be in some ways self-fulfilling of a slowdown?
Right. Well, we are seeing with, I think, the inflation rate and some of the interest rate decisions, we're starting to see the June numbers just came out, as I'm sure you saw, and we're starting to see consumers rein in their spending a little bit. On the business front, I think we've seen a bit of that pressure come off in the talent in the labor force side. What we're seeing moving forward, businesses are really preoccupied still with three things. One is the cost of doing business. The second is just the incredible regulatory burden that continues to add to the cost, the administrative cost of doing business. And third is the labor force. So as the labor force pressures come down a little bit, hopefully we can see businesses look forward to investing in their own businesses, bringing up productivity for the nation. But I think moving forward, what we're going to see, or need to see rather, from the government is a focus on incentivizing investment by business. Mm-hmm. We can't just spend, we need to invest. And that needs to be driven by the private sector. We can't just make the government do it, and it won't result in the growth that we need in the economy that's ultimately good for families, for individuals, and for businesses.
Matthew, so good to have you for this. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for your time, Amanda. Take care.
Matthew Holmes, Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Relations at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Coming up, artificial intelligence will change a lot of things, and that includes geopolitics. That's still ahead. But first, India has made its first soft landing on the moon, reaching the southern polar region with a lander and a rover. Exploration of the area is of great interest since it is the location of what appears to be frozen water. India is only the fourth country to land on the moon, along with the U.S., China, and Russia. It's a shot in the arm for India's private sector, too, which benefits from spin-off technology and know-how, and well-timed as the BRICS countries meet in South Africa. Maybe it's just as well Vladimir Putin couldn't attend in person. Russia had a failed lunar landing just a few days ago. We're back after this.